True scary stories. The rain slammed against the windshield as Clara squinted into the darkness ahead. The stretch of highway had long been abandoned by most travelers, but her GPS insisted this was the fastest route. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through her chest. "Fucking great," she muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. Her gas tank was teetering on empty, and the next station wasn't for miles. She checked her phone again, no signal. Her roommate Jenna had warned her about taking back roads on a night like this. "You're gonna end up on some Dateline special," she'd joked. Clara had laughed it off then, but now her laughter felt hollow, swallowed up by the storm. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Something darted across the road ahead, a shadow too quick to make out. She slammed on the brakes, her tires skidding on the wet pavement as her heart hammered in her chest. "What the fuck was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain. She scanned the road, her high beams cutting through sheets of water. Nothing. Breathing heavily, she rolled forward slowly, every nerve in her body on edge. Then, just as she was about to convince herself it was an animal, she saw it. A figure stood in the middle of the road. It was a man, or at least the shape of one. His clothes clung to his body, soaked from the rain, and his head hung low, chin nearly touching his chest. He didn't move. "Jesus Christ!" Clara muttered, her pulse racing. She rolled down the window a crack. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. "Fucking fantastic," she said, slamming the car into reverse. As she started to back up, the man's head snapped up. His face, if you could call it that, was featureless. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. just smooth, pale skin stretched taut over bone. Clara screamed, jerking the wheel as the figure started running toward her, its movements jerky and inhuman. The car fishtailed as she slammed on the gas, the tires spinning in the mud before finally catching traction. The figure disappeared into the darkness behind her, but the image of that blank face burned into her mind. She didn't stop driving until she reached a small, run-down gas station hours later. Clara burst into the gas station, drenched from the rain. The fluorescent lights inside flickered, giving the space an eerie, washed-out look. Behind the counter, an old man with a scruffy beard and yellowed eyes looked up from his newspaper. "Late night to be out driving, miss," he said, his voice gravelly and slow. I need gas," Clara stammered, her hands trembling. "And, a phone. Mine's dead." The old man cocked his head, his eyes narrowing. "Phone's out. Storm's got the lines down." "Of course it is," Clara muttered, biting her lip. "Can I at least use the bathroom?" He nodded, pointing toward the back. She walked quickly, her boots squeaking on the cracked tile floor. The bathroom door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a dingy, dimly lit space that smelled of mildew and bleach. As she splashed water on her face, she tried to calm down. "It's fine," she whispered to herself. "You're fine. It was just some psycho in the road, probably high or..." A loud bang echoed from outside the bathroom, cutting her off mid-sentence. Her head snapped toward the door. "Hello?" Silence. She crept back into the main store. The old man was gone, the counter empty. His chair rocked slightly as if he'd just left it. "Sir?" she called, her voice shaky. No response. She grabbed her car keys and turned toward the door. She'd pump her gas herself and get the hell out of here. But as she stepped outside, she froze. Her car was gone. "What the fuck?" she hissed, spinning around wildly. The gas station's neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly green glow over the parking lot. "Looking for this?" The voice was low and guttural, scraping against her ears like nails on a chalkboard. She turned slowly. The man from the road stood at the edge of the lot, holding her car keys. His featureless face was tilted upward as if he were smelling the rain. Clara backed away, her breath hitching. "Stay the fuck away from me!" He didn't move. Then suddenly the lights of the gas station flickered violently before plunging into total darkness. Clara bolted, running blindly into the woods behind the station. Branches tore at her clothes and face as she stumbled through the undergrowth. She didn't stop until she tripped over a root and fell hard, her knees scraping against the wet earth. She lay there, panting, ears straining for any sound. Nothing. She allowed herself a brief moment of relief before a hand clamped over her ankle. She screamed, kicking wildly as she was dragged backward through the mud. She clawed at the ground, her nails breaking as she tried to grab onto anything to stop her descent. The figure loomed over her, its head cocked to one side. Slowly, it reached out with a hand that was impossibly long, its fingers stretching and curling unnaturally. "No, no, no!" Clara sobbed, tears streaming down her face. But the hand didn't touch her. Instead, it pointed behind her. She turned her head and her stomach dropped. The old man from the gas station hung from a tree, his lifeless body swaying in the wind. His eyes were wide open, his face frozen in a grotesque expression of terror. Clara's scream echoed through the forest. Would you like more added here, or should I move toward the final act with the depressing conclusion? The circle of figures grew tighter, their movements deliberate yet disjointed, as if controlled by invisible strings. Clara stood frozen, her breaths shallow and uneven, her muscles locked in terror. The doppelganger's lifeless eyes stared at her, reflecting the twisted moonlight. One of them stepped forward, a perfect replica of her, but its face was warped, as though it had been pressed against glass and distorted. Its lips moved, but the voice came from everywhere at once. You should have stayed on the road! What are you? Clara shouted, her voice breaking. She stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The clone tilted its head, the movement jerky, almost mechanical. We are you! We are all of you! Behind it, another clone stepped forward, then another, their movements sinking into a macabre choreography. They formed a semicircle around her, their blank expressions slowly twisting into something that might have been smiles if they weren't so grotesque. Clara's mind raced. This can't be real. This isn't happening. You left us behind! One of them hissed, its voice layered and echoing. What the fuck are you talking about? Clara screamed. The first clone pointed a trembling, unnaturally long finger at her chest. Do you even remember? The others did. Clara's stomach churned as fragments of memories she couldn't place flickered through her mind. Faces, places, screams. But they didn't belong to her. Did they? You're lying, she said, her voice shaking. This isn't real! The clone with the distorted face stepped closer, so close that Clara could feel its cold breath. Its eyes glowed faintly, like dying embers. It's as real as you made it. Before Clara could react, the ground beneath her shifted and she fell. She landed hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The world around her was different now. The forest was gone, replaced by an infinite, desolate expanse of black water under a starless sky. The clones stood on the water's surface, surrounding her again. But now their faces were fully hers, no distortions, no blankness. Just identical, emotionless copies of Clara, watching her with a predatory stillness. The water began to rise, cold and viscous, pulling at her legs. She struggled, but the more she moved, the faster it climbed, creeping up her torso. "No! Let me go!" she screamed, thrashing against the encroaching liquid. One clone stepped forward, its expression serene but hollow. "You've been running from yourself all along!" "What the fuck does that mean?" Clara spat, choking on panic. The clone's head tilted, its eyes locking with hers. "This is where the truth lives, where you live." The water was at her chin now, her body paralyzed by the freezing weight. "What truth?" Clara sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "You already know," the clone whispered, before leaning in close, its breath icy. "But you'll never leave!" Clara screamed as the water swallowed her whole. She opened her eyes to the sound of laughter, her laughter. She was sitting at the table in her apartment, the one she shared with Jenna. The sun streamed through the windows and everything looked normal. Bad dream? Jenna asked, pouring coffee into a mug. Clara blinked, her mind racing. Yeah, I think so. Jenna laughed. You always did have a thing for creepy shit. Clara forced a smile, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She glanced down at her coffee and froze. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark surface of the liquid, but it wasn't moving. It grinned, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched far too long. Clara jumped back, the mug shattering on the floor. Whoa! What the hell? Jenna said, rushing over. Clara backed into the corner of the kitchen, her heart pounding. "Do you see that?" she gasped, pointing at the spilled coffee. Jenna looked at the mess on the floor and frowned. "See what?" Clara's reflection was still there, now in the puddle of coffee. Its grin widened, and its lips moved soundlessly. She looked up at Jenna, her throat dry. But Jenna wasn't Jenna anymore. Her face was blank, smooth, and featureless. The coffee puddle rippled, and the reflection spoke, its voice an echo in Clara's head. "You never left." The lights in the apartment flickered, and Clara screamed as the world around her twisted and folded into darkness. When they found Clara's apartment days later, it was empty. Her roommate Jenna was missing too, though strange noises had been reported by the neighbors. Sounds of laughter and crying that overlapped endlessly. On the kitchen floor, a broken mug lay in a puddle of coffee. And in the reflective surface of the liquid, if you looked closely enough, you could see a face. It was smiling. And it was waiting. The end.